After years and years and years and years of trying to get to the mountaintop and trying to get past a particular program in the Big Ten, has Penn State finally found its kryptonite. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and, of course, the Big Ten Live Show. And Matt Zemek, of course, standing by right here with Trojans Wire to break down Big Ten football with all of you. Leave the comments and questions there in the chat. Also, we would like to let you all know that Matt and I are going to continue in this time slot, but the show is going to look a little bit different going forward. We're excited about that. We'll give you some more details as those unfold, but they concern all of you giving us a call. So that's the important part of all of it going forward. Matt and I will be taking your comments and questions directly. So give us a call. Let us know what you want to hear and want to discuss concerning college football, but more on that to come. We're talking Big Ten football, of course, tonight. Matt, how you doing?
Doing well, and obviously no Big Ten show last Monday night. There was a certain football game, and Penn State. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. So Penn State's pursuit of Ohio State takes on added new dimensions with the Jim Knowles acquisition. You have Drew Auer coming back for 2025. I mean, it's just Penn State is just going all in, all the chips in the middle of the table. Like, you gotta love it. Like, this is a big time program, acting like a big time program, and shooting for the mountaintop. So standards are pretty clear at Penn State next season. It's beat Ohio State. It's win the Big Ten. Let's get to the very top of the mountain, not just the Final Four.
So Matt and I can certainly talk Jim Knowles and Penn State and Ohio State and the rivalry and the outlooks for 2025, but we'll do much better if we bring in this guy. We got Marty Leap standing by, of course, from Penn State Rivals. Good to see you, Marty. How you doing tonight? Oh, we don't have your audio.
My bad.
Now we got your audio.
The mute button remains undefeated, but no, excited to be here. Should be a fun topic to talk about. And for as heartbreaking of an end of the season it was for Penn State, ever since that Mitch Jeter field goal went through the uprights, literally everything that can go right for this program since then has. So, I mean, you said it yourself, Matt. You look ahead to 2025, and they're all in. They're all in a quest to win a national championship, and it's an exciting time in Happy Valley.
Marty, the college football calendar does not stop, especially these days. So people, the national championship's over, and 3 minutes later, people are like, yeah, that's fine. Ohio State did it. Great. Okay, 2025, let's go. That's just how people think in this news cycle these days. But I'm going to take us back to 2024 and what Penn State accomplished and where they came oh so close. And Matt and I will certainly ping pong back and forth in regards to hitting you up on Jim Knowles. But I'm going to start here. I went through my Big Ten power rankings, posted those the other day. I'm also doing a conference rankings that Matt will love. I've posted the ACC and the Big 12, and we go through every result, all the non-conference games, and then we add it all up and truly present a clear picture. We do seedings, differentials, the whole deal. Okay, my point with Penn State is I'm looking at Penn State and I'm going, did Penn State have a typical Penn State year? It was just masked by a different format and so forth, okay? Or did they not? Well, the pros of on the Penn State side is 11-1s, better than what they've done during James Franklin's tenure in the past. For succeeding in the playoff, playing two excellent football games, getting past those games, getting to a Notre Dame matchup where they went right down to the wire. There's a number of factors where you could be pro Penn State and say this was a breakthrough season. On the other hand, you could say, well, most Penn State teams would beat SMU and Boise State and arrive at the Notre Dame game, and that's one where they didn't break through and win the game. They also didn't play Michigan or whomever you want to slot in as that elite Oregon for that aided the 11-1 finish and getting to the Big Ten championship game, which of course would not have happened had Ohio State taking care of business on the final weekend. So breakthrough season for Penn State, or maybe just a different version of the past?
I think it was a breakthrough season, and I think I say that as much as because of what is happening off the field now. I mean, obviously, You look at this program, there is alignment from top to bottom within the university, within the football program, with Pat Kraft, with President Benependi, that was not there before. Before this athletic director, before this President Benependi took over 2 years ago. So a lot of some of the roadblocks in terms of, as we just saw with the Jim Knowles hire, in terms of assistant coaching salary, in terms of being able to get the boosters and the big money donations in that you need to keep guys around, like we saw with Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and Katron Allen, et cetera, et cetera. Those things weren't there in the past, and they are now. And I think you can tie some of that to, hey, we made the playoff. We were literally one play away from going to the national championship game. We're that close. That makes that easier to sell through James Franklin and Pat Kraft to boosters, donors, et cetera. But regardless of what has ultimately sprung it, there is a complete buy-in, alignment, financial commitment that has not been there before. So the fact that is there now, that to me makes this a breakthrough season, because I think moving forward, that just increases your odds of being able to compete at this level. If you're Penn State, increases your odds of being able to get back to the semifinals and beyond. You know, that it's not going to be 8 years between trips to Indy. So I do say breakthrough season, but again, I say that for having as much to do with what has happened off the field and behind the scenes with the football program and with the university and with the athletic department over the course of the past few months as I do anything else.
Marty, my question for you, or at least my first question, is: would we be sitting here with Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator if Penn State had not gotten to the semis? You know, let's say Penn State beats SMU but loses to Boise State. You think there's still buy-in from Jim Knowles, or do you think it doesn't happen? How much do you think that winning 2 playoff games really did convince Knowles and create the culture, the environment conducive to making this big splash in the coaching world?
I mean, I'm sure it didn't hurt. I think it probably happens regardless. I mean, it's, you know, obviously nothing we need to get into tonight because it's not necessarily Penn State centric, but a lot of the reporting things that have come out, it looks like Knowles was looking for a way out of Columbus due to some, you know, just disagreements on the staff there regardless. And I know he'd interviewed at Penn State in the past, had a long-standing relationship with James Franklin. The kind of program, the culture, that sort of thing that James Franklin's cultivated played a large role in Knowles being interested in and being attracted to Penn State. So I think it probably happens regardless. But that said, again, James is able to go to the boosters, to the donors, whoever it may be, Pat Kraft, and say, look, we were literally one play away from playing for the national championship. So, you know, I think those things all are kind of intertwined because, you know, part of the reason Jim Knowles wants to come to Penn State is because what's back on this defense, and without the buy-in to have the NIL money available, I don't think the defense is attractive because Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, and Key Wheatley are probably getting ready for the NFL draft instead of getting ready for their senior years at Penn State. So I definitely think there's some correlation there. But I think, you know, in your scenario where, let's say, they still beat SMU but then lose the Fiesta Bowl, I don't think that prevents it from happening. But it certainly doesn't hurt when, again, you can sit there and say, hey, we were this close to finally reaching the national championship game. And, you know, hey, who knows? Anything. It's one game. It would have been one game. Anything could have happened. But, yeah, I think he would have been here regardless with everything that shook out, but that certainly didn't hurt.
We've got Marty Leap on the line from Penn State Rivals, breaking down Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State, going to Penn State, of course. Probably the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country. I think that already was the case in Columbus, and now it's even more so the case. The numbers that I saw was that with bonuses, he was pushing $3 million at Ohio State, and then I saw like 3 years, $9.3 million at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
So $3.1 million at Penn State. Also a Philadelphia native. How much money obviously is a huge factor. Also ties to the state. Where do you stand on those two being factors in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think those are factors. I've read earlier today that, you know, his base salary is going to make him the highest paid coordinator in the history of college football. That's pretty hard to say no to. I mean, I have no doubts if it was solely a money thing, though, he'd still be in Columbus because whatever Penn State or Oklahoma or anyone else was going to offer, Ohio State was going to match it. Mark, you mentioned being from Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia ties. I'm sure that doesn't hurt. I know he has a lot of family that still lives in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area, so it doesn't hurt to be closer. But again, I think a lot of it is just the program Penn State that James Franklin has built. It is a program that coaches are, it's attractive to other coaches. Look how many guys have gone on to either leave Penn State to become a head coach or take a coordinator spot somewhere from a position coach at Penn State and work their way to being a head coach. Ricky Ronnie, Charles Huff, Joe Moorhead, Brent Pry, Anthony Poindexter seems like whenever the Virginia job opens up again, he's going to get it. There's a lot of pros to working for James Franklin, and I think that helped as well. I definitely think it was a combination of all the things. But again, like you said, Mark, whenever you get to come back home to your home state and be the highest paid coordinator in the history of college football in the process, that's pretty lucrative for just about anybody.
Marty, in terms of following the Jim Knowles story over the past week or so, how close was it between Penn State and Oklahoma? How much of a angle did the Sooners have on this? Was it always Penn State in the lead, or was this did this take some swerves or some late plot twists? What's your read on how this all played out?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously there were a lot of people in Oklahoma circles who had thought for a few weeks that this was going to be a done deal, that he was going to leave Ohio State and go to Oklahoma. And, personally, I never thought, not saying I never thought that was on the table, because I'm sure it was discussed. I know he talked to Oklahoma a lot. It never made a lot of sense to me, though, because if part of the reason why you're leaving Ohio State is you're clashing with Ryan Day, you're clashing with Larry Johnson, there's some debate on how did Jim Knowles really have full control of his defense. So if that's your main sticking point, why would you go work for Brent Venables, first and foremost, where Venables is going to run his stuff? And secondly, yeah, I'm if I was a betting man, I would bet money that next year at this time, Brent Venables isn't even Oklahoma's coach. He's already on the hot seat. Their schedule is miserable. I do wonder how much of that was, obviously he has ties to Oklahoma from his time at Oklahoma State, excuse me. His fiance is from Oklahoma, of people kind of connecting the dots and the fact that he was talking to the Sooners. From our end at Happy Valley Insider, it was probably Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening when we really started to hear, hey, this is heating up. He wants to be at Penn State. Penn State obviously wants him. The original train of thought was we wouldn't hear anything until Sunday because he still wanted to be there for the championship celebration with his players, which I totally understand and don't fault him for at all. Obviously, that didn't happen. Again, there's conflicting reports on to whether or not he chose not to go, if Ryan Day didn't allow him there, whatever it was. But Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, we really started to hear there was a real possibility of this. It rolled over into Friday, and that's when you started seeing reports of Ohio State countering, of Oklahoma throwing silly money around. And, it was like late Saturday, early Sunday morning that we definitely had confirmation on our site. It was going to happen. Jim Knowles had taken the job. It was going to be him. So, yeah, I think based off of, what we were told by sources, the reporting we did, and just kind of reading the room on it, I got the vibe that when he made up his mind, he didn't want to be in Columbus anymore. And then Tom Allen left Penn State. That's where he wanted to be, because it wasn't, when Tom Allen first left, Jim Knowles is one of the first name people were going to mention no matter what. And obviously, as I'm sure Matt Danton Lynn came up too. And there was, I do wonder, I know James Franklin made a big push for Danton Lynn that fell through. And then he kind of really reset the board and kind of waited it out till after the national championship game. And that's when the Knowles and Penn State sides really started to talk. So I think once it got on the other side of the national championship game, Penn State didn't have a defensive coordinator yet. Knowles' mind seemed like it was pretty made up that his time in Columbus had run its course. I get the vibe Penn State's the place he always wanted to be, and it was just a matter of making things work. I don't even necessarily think so much it was financially as much as it was him probably wanting to get those reassurances that, some of the problems he was having in Ohio State weren't going to happen at Penn State. And in addition to that, there was a story on Yahoo Sports, I believe by Dellinger, either yesterday or the day before, about Anthony Poindexter, Penn State safety coach, who was in the running to be promoted to defense coordinator. a lot of people thought once Stanton Lynn didn't happen, it was going to be just promote Dex. And James Franklin pulled Dex aside, had a conversation with him about Jim Knowles, and his response was literally like, holy crap, we can actually get Jim. And Anthony Poindexter leaves this meeting with James Franklin, pulls out his phone, calls Jim Knowles, and starts selling to Jim Knowles why he should take the Penn State job. So I think those connections helped as well. But yeah, I definitely think there was some real flirtation with Oklahoma. Ohio State was always going to make a big push to keep him. But I think once it got to about middle of the week or so, back end of the week, it was clear Jim Knowles wanted to be at Penn State. Penn State wanted Jim Knowles, and it was just a matter of making it work, and they were able to make it work.
So, Marty, I'm blanking on who was the defensive coordinator before Manny Diaz?
Brent Pry.
Oh, yeah. Duh. Yeah. I knew he became a head coach. Yeah, Brent Pry, Manny Diaz, Tom Allen. There's a certain thought that would be, okay, they have gotten to a recruiting level on that side of the football that as long as they get a capable defensive coordinator, they're going to be a top 5 or 10 defense in the nation, maybe even better than that. But at the same time, when you're that close to the top, then, getting the best or arguably the best versus a top 10 defensive coordinator could be just enough to push you to the top. Did you see any differences between going from Pry to Diaz to Allen, and then what you know about Jim Knowles and the way he sets things up? Any type of difference or boost there?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, from Pry to Manny to Tom Allen, no knock on any of them, because Brent Pry was in Penn State for a long time. He'd been with James Franklin since Vanderbilt, did a very good job, and Tom Allen had a good year this year. I think Manny Diaz was the best of the three. I think everybody knows Manny Diaz defense, right? You're going to blitz, you're going to attack, you're going to give up a 50-yard play, but then the next 3 plays, you're going to give up -5, and it's all going to work out. And that scheme, that mentality, it fit Penn State. It fit the defense. It fit what they had. I thought he was the most successful of the three personally. And I think Knowles is more in the mold of Manny Diaz than the other two. Now, he doesn't blitz nearly as much as Manny, but few people do. But like you said, Mark, you have the talent that, unless they've got like one of the three of us coaching this defense, you should be a top 5 to 10 unit every year. And I saw some people say that, some Penn State fans say, hey, couldn't this money maybe been better spent elsewhere? And I get that. But like you said, Mark, when you're that close to getting over the top, to reaching that pinnacle like they were this year, having the guy who is arguably the best defensive coordinator in college football could be what puts you over the top. I also think if you're Penn State, the fact that Jim Knowles is not at Ohio State anymore is just as much of a boost to you as it is that he's now at Penn State. So I think that's all factored in here. As for what the defense is going to look like, I mean, and you mentioned, having that good of a coordinator, the difference that can make, I do think it can pay off, because you have Knowles, who is so incredibly creative with disguising pressures and his ability to get pressure with 4 guys, and the way he uses safeties, especially because Penn State is, even with losing Jalen Reed and KJ Winston to the NFL draft, is still extremely deep at safety, extremely talented. I think these are all things that are where Knowles and Penn State's going to be a just natural mesh together. And, I will never undervalue what a coach can bring to a table who has coached in, called plays in, and won championship games. So I think that experience of Jim Knowles in the national championship, when Texas is driving with 4 minutes to go to tie the game and your defense comes up with a scoop and score to ice it, those types of situations, I think those can never be overstated, how important that is for a coach to have. So I think adding that is also very, very important for Penn State. And that's something that, no knock on Tom Allen or Manny Diaz or Brent Pry, none of them ever had that. None of them were ever in that position in their coaching careers where, hey, this is it. Like I said, 4 minutes to go in the semifinals, you're up by 7. Texas is inside the 20. What are we going to do? We're in the national championship game. Notre Dame just drove the ball right down our throats on the opening drive. How am I going to adjust? I think having that experience is also extremely important on a team that, again, you're looking at 2025 is you're going to see them get some conversation for preseason number one. Expectations are going to be sky high. So I think having that experience of Jim Knowles, I apologize for my dog barking in the background, yelling at the cat, but having that experience of Jim Knowles, I think, is also very important.
Marty, we saw the Rose Bowl. We saw Jim Knowles' Ohio State defense come down on Oregon, and it was a second bite at the apple. It was a rematch. It wasn't the first time, but nevertheless, Penn State fans have to be really excited seeing what Ohio State did to that Oregon offense in the first half of the Granddaddy, and you contrast that to what we saw in the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. What do you think's the defining difference for Jim Knowles in terms of being able to go up against and defuse the Oregon offense in light of Tom Allen's inability to find answers in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, if Penn State would have played even average defense, they would have won the Big Ten championship this year. Their offense marched up and down the field on Oregon all night long. Defense could never get a stop. I think a big difference, again, I think against an Oregon offense that, just going off of this year with Dylan Gabriel, was so timing and tempo based. Jim Knowles' ability to disguise what he was doing against an offense that runs so much on timing and being in rhythm. If you can disguise what you're doing on defense, that's the best way to break an offense like that up, because you never let your quarterback get into rhythm. You never let that quarterback get into a tempo, and that's what we saw in the Rose Bowl. And before you could blink, it was 34-0 by the time Oregon had finally scored. So, yeah, I think that was a big difference. One thing, too, I with Knowles that I think is something that's kind of underrated, not going to get talked about a lot outside of Penn State circles. There were a lot of communication issues this year with the defense. Everyone remembers, I'm sure, that first half against Bowling Green, when Bowling Green is just marching up and down the field on Penn State. Well, at halftime, Tom Allen gets moved to the box, spends the rest of the year coaching from the box, while former All-American linebacker Dan Connor, who's now the linebackers coach, is the one calling the plays, because there was a communication issue of some sort between Allen and the players. So Connor steps in to clean that up, but you now have this sequence where Allen calls the play to Dan Connor, who then calls it to Kobe King or Dominic DeLuca, who then has to give the call on the field, and that takes time. And against Oregon, to go back to using them as a specific example, Oregon's tempo gave them a lot of problems. And whenever you've got a defense that's taking that long to get a call in or having communication issues like that, tempo is going to give you problems. Against Ohio State, when Penn State was up 10-0 with a chance to take that game by the throat, the Buckeyes come out, go right down and score to make it 10-7, thanks in large part to two communication snafus that left wide receivers wide open for big chunk plays. So I think cleaning up that communication as well is going to be something that I don't know outside of Penn State circles how much people really know how big of a problem that was at times this year on the defense. So again, I don't know how much it'll get talked about on like a national level, but I think getting that cleaned up is going to be a huge plus for the defense as well.
Last question out of me, Marty, would be on the other side of the football. So maybe Drew Aller is making comments, or it's running through his mind what Aaron Rodgers, they used to say about him, thinking, are you ever going to draft me a wide receiver? So the two, arguably, correct me if I'm wrong, off the top of my head, the two best wide receivers, so you got Trey Wallace and you got Amari Evans, have hit the transfer portal. Kyron Hudson does come in from USC. So do you expect them to make any major moves there?
Yeah, I mean, they brought in Kyron Hudson, who, I mean, Matt, obviously you could talk to Hudson better than myself, but I feel like every time I watched the USC game, I just saw Hudson making plays, and I never quite understood, like whenever he transferred, I looked at his stats and like, this doesn't seem right to me. I don't know if it was misused by Lincoln Riley, or if maybe it's just one of those guys where he made, didn't make a lot of plays, but the plays he made were such big flashy plays, they stick out in your mind. Like, I know against Penn State, he had a heck of a game, and everyone remembers the catch against LSU. But I think of him, and again, you know better than me, but I think you put him in an offense like this where he is your true number one wide receiver. I think that will, that alone will see an increase in his stats. And they also brought in Devontae Ross from Troy, who Devontae Ross to me is Omari Evans, but he can actually catch the ball. He doesn't drop 6 out of every 7 passes thrown his way. So we'll see what happens there. Tysier Denmark is a young kid they're very, very high on from Philadelphia. Will be a redshirt freshman in the fall. I expect him to play a big role as well. And, you mentioned if they're going to add anyone else, there's still the spring transfer portal window. I'm sure any receivers who hit the portal out of spring ball, Penn State is going to, vet them through and through. They would love to find a true wide receiver run in the portal, which I don't think is going to happen. But at the same time, I do think that a trio of Hudson, Ross, and Tysier Denmark can be better than what they had last year with Wallace and Evans, largely because the inability to get separation combined with drops was just such a killer from the two of them. You look at the interception at the end of the Orange Bowl. The defensive back essentially ran Omari Evans' route for him. Like it was not pretty. You go against Ohio State right before halftime. The Igbinosa interception was a great play. That ball hit Trey Wallace right in the hands. That should have been a catch, should have been a touchdown, would have given Penn State the lead at the half, and who knows where that game goes then. So I think that trio will be better. But I also think, and part of this is because Andy Coulter-Nicky is so good at this, building offense around his playmakers. You've got Singleton back. You've got Allen back. Both of them are good pass catchers. They lose Tyler Warren, but the tight end room is still really good. You've got probably at least 4 guys in that tight end room still who are going to play on Sundays. So there's a ton of weapons there still. They'll find a way to make it work. And I think some of the two has to fall on Drew. He made a lot of strides from 2023 to 2024. You expect him to take another step, obviously. And again, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, and I thought one thing Rodgers, when he was in his prime, was so good at was elevating his wide receiver room. And if you are a quarterback, the caliber that Drew Aller strides to be and that he has the talent to be, you should be able to elevate your wide receiver room. So I think that, again, I think they'll be better because I like what they have more now. I also think getting that complete change of scenery helps because I do think there were times Drew didn't trust his receivers because of how many times they struggled for separation. They struggled to get open. They dropped the ball, and it made him gun shy, however you want to put it, to throw the ball. So I think getting him a fresh group of receivers that he doesn't have these trust issues with can help a lot as well. And again, I think Hudson, I like him a lot. He's done it in the Big Ten. I think Ross can be a nice little slot speed type of guy. And Tysier Denmark, that's a name for people to start to learn ahead of the Penn State season because I think Denmark is going to have a big impact on this offense as a redshirt freshman this fall.
Anything else, Matt?
Nope.
Well, Marty, we appreciate you being here. And again, we want to make sure that everyone's aware that you can catch Marty's work at Penn State Rivals. You see it right there on the banner, along with Marty's X handle. So just follow him right there with all of his work on Penn State football recruiting in particular. Marty, good to see you. Appreciate you stopping by, breaking things down for us as always.
Absolutely. Before you know it, it'll be spring ball. We'll have all kinds of more football to talk about. So if I don't see you guys before then, I'll talk to you then.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. That is the Penn State story. And again, paying Jim Knowles to move from rival Ohio State, be the highest paid coordinator in all of college football. Indiana has re-upped their defensive coordinator, Bryant Haynes, $1.8 million. These coordinator rates here in the last 10 years or so, Matt, they've outdistanced inflation just slightly. I'll tell you that.
When Indiana's paying almost $2 million for a coordinator, hello.
Yeah. And on the Ohio State front, obviously the big news is Jim Knowles is leaving to go to Penn State, but who's going to be the Ohio State defensive coordinator? I got a list of names here. We got Tim Walton, who's currently on the staff. He's been in the NFL a number of times. Ohio State, a fine player for them back in the 1990s, but he's on the Buckeyes staff. He may take over. Also, Matt Gabrera is on the Ohio State staff. So he was the defensive coordinator in Indiana moved to Ohio State as a special assistant, and then this past season was the safeties coach. A lot less experience in Tim Walton, but there's a lot of talk out there about Matt Guerrero taking over in Columbus. Luke Fickell, I saw this name being bantied about, and who in the world would take a demotion from a fairly high Big Ten caliber program to become a coordinator? But things are obviously not working too well in Wisconsin. Don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Matt.
Like stranger things have happened, and we know that Luke Fickell likes living in Ohio, and he has ties to the Ohio State program. I mean, stranger things have happened. That's for sure. Marty mentioned, he thinks Brent Venables probably won't be Oklahoma's coach at this time next year. There's a guy named Lincoln Riley. I mean, he did a really good job at Oklahoma. But anyway, Fickell to Ohio State, realizing that his Wisconsin tenure, seems to be going nowhere. I mean, it would not be an absolute out of left field shocker. Now, am I expecting it? No, of course not. Generally you don't see guys who have power conference jobs, especially in the Big Ten or the SEC, make a downward move to coordinator. But like we just watched Steve Spagnuolo make another Super Bowl with the Chiefs, and like he's the ultimate example of a guy who, he was never cut out to be a head coach, but he might be the best defensive coordinator ever. I mean, he's certainly in the conversation, along with Richie Pettibone of the Redskins under Joe Gibbs. You take Bill Arnsparger under Don Shula with the Dolphins. I mean, like the Mount Rushmore of defensive coordinators. So some coaches in the history of football had the wisdom and the self-awareness to realize, what? I don't have to be a head coach. I can just be the best coordinator on the planet. And so Luke Fickell might feel that tug. So anyway, it would not ambush me if that happened, but I'm also not going to say, oh, it's likely. Of course not. But stranger things than that have happened. So it really is interesting to see. This is a late cycle vacancy, and we've seen plenty of wildness occur with a late cycle vacancy, right? Like Mario Cristobal going to Miami. That was a late cycle movement. It's not something that happened in late November, early December. Of course, Kalen DeBoer, going to Alabama. Well, that was with Nick Saban retiring, and so pieces of the puzzle. When things happen in January instead of in late November or early December, like someone then senses that opening, senses that rare opportunity, and jumps at it, even if we think that person has a really good situation or has a level of stature that a coach ordinarily doesn't drop right away. We see these things happen late in cycles, late in the carousel cycle. Like I would not write that off as a possibility. I wouldn't predict it happening, but I certainly wouldn't discount it and completely eliminate it from any list of scenarios.
Randy Bates has Ohio State ties. He's currently with the Carolina Panthers as defensive coordinator. Chris Hampton is at Oregon, where he is a co-defensive coordinator and in charge of the defensive backfield. Jeff Hafley, former Buckeye defensive coordinator, went to Boston College as head coach, now with the Green Bay Packers, and former San Francisco defensive backs coach, talked about as having ties to Ohio State and possibly a candidate as well. Super chat from Nick. Nick, I always know when Nick chimes in, it's going to be a shot at Ohio State at the national champions. Says Jim Knowles couldn't stand a pantless champ any longer. Yes. Apparently. Or maybe he wanted a bigger challenge. Maybe the challenge in Columbus wasn't big enough for him, Nick. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I think money may have talked a little bit as well. maybe not just money, but having that designation, as Marty pointed out, of being the highest paid coordinator in the country and the highest ever, that moves some people. These guys have big egos generally, and that's not a knock on them. They have risen in their profession, and that's one of the reasons why, and that's also the culmination of getting to that point in your profession. So
always a great reminder that having an ego in a cutthroat environment, like, that's necessary generally. The trick is not letting the ego spill out too much that it hampers your effectiveness, your people skills. But yeah, you definitely need to have an ego in this business. And so when people say, well, he has an ego, yeah, he better, right? So always a good reminder, Mark.
Nick is saying Mark's about to cry. I guess tears of joy, because it's only been 1 week since winning the national championship. So thank you, Nick, for the reminder there. Appreciate that. Also wanted to point out, and I'm seeing in the chat, of course, Ryan Day's picked up this nickname from Michigan fans, being third base. But when a national championship program's handed over to the current Michigan coach, I don't know what you would call him. I don't know what kind of nickname we've come up with for Sharon Moore, but he's kind of halfway down the third base line, I guess, is what he was handed. So now that we've seen the culmination of the playoffs, and this being a Big Ten show, what is your assessment of the conference? And of course, the conference owns the championship, and that's the first thing people look at. Also had a second participant in the semifinals, also had, who knows how Oregon, the structure and the format of the playoff and the path of the playoff is going to, we saw it play out for the first time this year, is going to prove crucial in our recollection of this season and how these teams stand. Because when people were talking about, okay, now that we're halfway through the national championship game, Ohio State's clearly the best team. Okay, who's the second best team? Well, is it Notre Dame or Texas? Maybe it's still Penn State, even though they lost. Oregon got completely forgotten just because they hit Ohio State early. If they're in a different bracket, then maybe they're playing in the national championship game.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the bracket as really the biggest thing about this playoff format that needs to be fixed. Obviously, there was a huge uproar about Indiana getting in and BYU and also Miami being snubbed. But really, the big story of this first 12-team playoff was how in blazes did the one unbeaten team and the number one overall seed play the most talented team in the quarterfinals. Like, that was just the biggest unforced error by far, by miles. And we just did a long Penn State segment, and you asked Marty the question about, was this really a breakthrough, or was it just the format? It's less about the format, it's more about the bracket. Penn State gets that primrose path, SMU, Boise State. What happens next year if Penn State gets, maybe the same seed? Penn State could be the 6th seed next year, and instead of getting SMU, Boise, it's totally different. You get a power conference team. Maybe they change the seeding format, such that the top 4 seeds are not all conference champions, and it could look very different. So the bracketing really is a huge story. That said, and looking at the Big Ten and everything that's going on, the Big Ten's in a really good position, right? Because Ohio State's Ohio State. Ohio State's going to win 10, 11 games. And Penn State is really well situated, as we've already established on the show. And then at Michigan, looks like they have a real meal deal quarterback with Underwood. So, that should definitely raise the floor, if not also the ceiling, for that program, getting back to the expected high-level standard. Michigan just slipped this year because they didn't have a quarterback ready to go. So they've addressed that. And, oh, by the way, there's this team that went unbeaten in the regular season last year, Oregon. Obviously, questions at quarterback. Is Dante Moore going to be ready to step up and be the man? The jury's out on that. But if he is, then Oregon has all the other pieces. Dan Lanning's elite recruiting, elite portal work. The investments from Mr. Knight. So Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon. You have 4 home run hitting teams right there, and this doesn't include Indiana, which made the playoff last season. And so is there going to be a 6th team? And so USC, I'm not saying it's likely, but this Chad Bowden hire, general manager, like he seems to be a top tier GM who might be able to get that house in order. And if so, maybe USC is able to get off the mat. And I, as people know here at the Voice of College Football, or at least most people know, I did a USC show for quite some time in 2024. And one of the big talking points, like with Adam Lamparello and other people who, called in or were in the chat, is Jen Cohen serious about USC football? Is Jen Cohen going to make the investments? Is Jen Cohen really ready for this job? Is Jen Cohen doing the things to help USC compete? YES, yes. Like, she's given Lincoln Riley, the big time GM. She's anteed up for the defensive staff. She's made the investments in facilities. Like, Lincoln Riley is getting everything a coach could realistically want. And so, as my Trojans Wire staff writer, Adam Bradford, wrote over the weekend, this GM hire, it removes any remaining excuses. Not that there were necessarily any excuses left, but like that general manager question was kind of like a cloud hovering over the program. Now that that's been addressed, zero excuse for Lincoln Riley to not at least go 9-3 in 2025 with that schedule, the way it sets up for USC. And you look at Jed Fish in Washington as well. Fish got stuck in a pothole at the quarterback spot this year. If he can address that, Washington's might be able to rise up to a 9 or 10 win level. So really, and I haven't even talked about Iowa. We haven't talked about Wisconsin. Like, the Big Ten could have a ton of really good teams that are all at least in the mix for the playoff, if not, national championship contenders. So there's some quality, there's some depth. You see lots of programs investing a considerable amount of resources. You mentioned Indiana paying almost $2 million for a coordinator. Big Ten's in a pretty good place right now. I think that is very, very clear cut.
Before we get to our caller here, we got our buddy David on the line. We'll bring him in here in just a second. And that's a good reminder that going forward, starting next week, Matt and I getting together with all of you college football fans each and every Monday night is going to take on a little bit different look, a little bit different format. We're going to take your calls. And so be here and circle it on your calendar every Monday at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific with Matt and I. And also, I'm going to give Matt a week off. He's going to take a few others off, although it's not going to be a night off for him because he's got a lot of basketball to cover coming up in the next few months. But 3 weeks from tonight, I've pretty much hit my limit on this, Matt, where I just have to take everybody on this one. So we're going to have an Ohio State, Michigan, everything debate. Listen up in the chat. Mark your calendar right now, Monday, February 17th, 6 Eastern time. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to take your calls. If you call all night, I'm going to be here as long as is required, and I'm going to take comments and questions. I'm just telling you, be prepared. I am just telling you to be prepared. If you call, be prepared to be obliterated, not verbally. I'm not going to yell at anyone. I'm going to keep my composure. I'm not going to insult anyone. No, factually to obliterate you. Just be prepared for that because that's what's coming. All right. Got our buddy David showing up here.
I'm going to be there for that one, Mark. Yeah. Well, mark me down for that one, Mark. I will be there with bells on, needless to say. Needless to say.
Yeah, I've hit my limit. And there, again, every fan base has respectful fans, knowledgeable fans, passive fans, aggressive fans, delusional fans, completely
Right.
ignorant, moronic fans. All, and none of them are any different than the others. I just happened, after Ohio State again won this national championship, to run in to just a chorus line of morons that wear maize and blue. Just an endless idiocy
Oh, well.
of idiots, morons, just making stupid claims. I'll throw one out there.
Hey, I hate to
You
say
won the national championship because you stole Alabama's plays. I heard, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, take it away, David.
They live in denial and delusion, Mark. It's part of their.
And again,
well, that's who they are. Let's just.
It's our largest fan base. We love our Michigan fans, but some of them need to be corrected from time to time, as do Ohio State fans as well.
Oh, come on now. Ohio State fans are the most passionate, knowledgeable, fan base out there, Mark. Come on now. Let's go.
To keep my objective status on this, I will remind people I have also named Ohio State on Twitter as the dumb fan base of the day.
Oh, Mark. Those are exceptions. Those are the exceptions, Mark. There's just a few. Don't let a few bad apples ruin the bunch. By the way, I think I heard Matt talking here just a second ago. It seemed to me like Matt was describing maybe the best conference in all of college football, with all that depth and talent and number of good programs. Somebody might want to alert DeReal and Paul Feinbaum. I think he was giving a pretty good case for the deepest and best conference in all of college football. What do you think, gentlemen?
That's pretty undeniably true right now. It's the ball's in the SEC's court. SEC has to change this. The Big Ten doesn't have to change anything. The Big Ten just needs to maintain. So that right there, that dynamic, that architecture, the Big Ten's boss right now, SEC's got to go knock the door down. So you can't say the SEC is the best conference right now. Was it the best conference a couple years ago? Sure. This is not then. Big Ten has back-to-back national championships, and again, has that quality depth that I just outlined. And meanwhile, the SEC this past season, it really wasn't quality depth. It was more like a muddled parity, right?
That's right.
It was like John Isner, Nicholas Mahou at Wimbledon. The match was close, and it went on forever because neither guy could return serve worth a darn. It was close because of the limitations. So the SEC was close and competitive because everyone had some big-time limitations. And we saw the Big Ten, crush some skulls, chiefly Ohio State, in the playoff. And Ohio State was clearly better than Texas when the SEC and the Big Ten went up against each other in the semis. So, it shouldn't even be a debate right now. It's the Big Ten.
Your main selling point, David, should be that you should give some honor to the team up north for defeating their SEC counterpart in a bowl game. That's part of your argument as well, right?
They did beat an Alabama team that I thought was challenged, but no, to be fair, that was a quality win, especially considering they were sitting out a lot of players. I will say that was a solid win. Although I think that win did not necessarily help Jaden Milroe, by the way, in his future as an NFL prospect. If any team looking to draft him at quarterback watched that game, if any game hurt his stock, it would be that bowl game, by the way.
Yeah.
Do not put in the tape of that bowl game. Yeah,
he regressed this year, and Dave and I will just say you won't be surprised if you've been paying attention for all these many phone calls and many hours that we've spent discussing college football, that I am not so apt to jump where Matt is on best conference. I'm still running numbers, producing videos, and I will let you know if we are truly talking top to bottom. If we're talking about the very top. Yes, I believe the Big Ten, even outside of Ohio State. Again, if Oregon had a different path, Penn State played as well as they did. I do think that at the very top, the Big Ten is better, but I'm, running those numbers and producing those videos. And so that'll be out here in a couple days.
By the way, kudos to Matt for making a Wimbledon reference. I didn't think Matt would go there, by the way. Nice job, Matt. But I will say that, when you look at the overall depth of the conference, though, and this is something we were talking about, because you were talking about the advantage of the SEC having the depth, though. But I think the depth in the Big Ten is getting there. Matt, did you guys already mention Illinois? Because Illinois is probably going to be in a lot of people's preseason top 12 to top 15 in the country this year. And, they've got some players back. And then if USC, come on, Matt, if Lincoln Riley can get it going there, at least get them back to an 8-4, 9-3 program with the perennial top 4 programs that you already mentioned, this conference at the very least can be 6, 7, maybe even 8 deep, depending on Iowa and what they can do.
Do you think Michigan's in the top 8, David?
Well, no, I said they're part of the top 4. They're part of the top 4. Yeah,
Matt, what would have you said after that Cotton Bowl a couple years ago if we would have said USC is going to go 8-5, 7-6 the next 2 years?
I don't think you have found a single soul on this planet,
right?
Yeah, including me.
Yeah. Well, I thought after the good start, I thought after the LSU, but they lost a lot of close games. To be fair, I mean, and you guys probably talked about this on Trojan Talk. I mean, there was probably 2 or 3 wins left out there this year by USC with just maybe poor end of game management, things of that nature that I saw in a few USC games.
USC led in the fourth quarter in 11 of its 12 regular season games. Like, that is just the mind-blowing stat of 2024 for the Trojans.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, guys, I did want to get to the Jim Knowles situation, if I may comment a little bit on it. I'd be remiss if I didn't. Few things here. I don't know if you guys have already addressed it. I did hear you guys talk to the Penn State caller and analyst. I do think, and I don't know if this has already been mentioned, that there was some, and you may get into this on Buckeye Talk, Mark, that there was some division there between Day and Knowles, particularly after the Oregon loss, where I think that, Knowles kind of took, from what I heard, the situation was not good with him and Knowles after that game in particular. Now, to be fair, Knowles made the necessary adjustments after that game, and Ohio State's defense went on a great run after that and played great defense in nearly every game after that. But I heard that was something that was maybe factored into the equation here. It's also been noted, and you guys have I believe you guys have talked about this on Buckeye Talk, some of the disagreement that he's had with Larry Johnson. And to be fair, the one thing about Knowles is, and if you go back and look at it, at Oklahoma State, he was used to running a 3-4 defense. And, that's not what they want to do at Ohio State. They recruit Dean Line to run a 4-3. And I think that was maybe an issue as well. By the way, I had my own disagreements with Larry Johnson. A lot of Buckeye fans did, especially a year ago, on rotating. See, Buckeye fans go back and forth on this. Either he rotates too much or he doesn't rotate enough on the defensive line. I thought maybe this year he did a little bit better balance. But last year I thought he was playing the starters way too much. And that was one of the things that cost him in the fourth quarter of the most important game last year. So when they couldn't get the necessary stop they needed in the fourth quarter. But I just bottom line, I have a couple other points, but did you guys hear about some of those disagreements? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on those.
Yes. So what I have heard, runs in line with the Oregon week, the aftermath of that game, and then also runs in line just with Ryan Day. It would make a lot of sense once his complete control of the offense was handed over to Chip Kelly. Well, he naturally has more time to, and stated before the season, I'm going to be more involved in the defense and the special teams. And so I think that was certainly present. Now, in terms of defensive line rotation, I know our buddy Steve Hellwagon was very adamant a few weeks ago concerning defensive line rotation, that Ohio State, what he wanted to see was, okay, you got the 4 studs in to start a series, and then if they get a 3-and-out stop, great, everything's good. They go to the sideline to take a break. If they don't, you give a first down, second first down, and then you get near the red zone. Boom, you bring them back in. That's kind of what he wanted to see. I do think that they backed off. They obviously had the opportunity against Tennessee and against Oregon. I'd have to go back and look at the snap counts. I know there's a few sites that post those to see if they actually, I would hope that they did, but I guess it doesn't matter now. Whatever they did worked in terms of those starter reps. But against Texas and against especially Texas and also Notre Dame, I could imagine that I didn't see those guys coming out of the Texas game often.
Right. Well, I mean, there were some valuable snaps. I mean, Cade McDonald, who on their defensive tackle played some meaningful snaps, made a huge play in the Penn State game. Kenyatta Jackson, Mitchell Melton got in there for some key snaps. Caden Curry was a guy I always thought played well whenever he saw meaningful snaps. But I mean, I understand playing the frontline guys, especially with the way Sawyer and JTT were playing, towards the end of the year and into the playoff. I will say, just overall, with Knowles leaving, it's not necessarily a surprise that coordinators move on after a national title. We saw, I mean, honestly, this was the major thing after 2014 with Ohio State, was losing Tom Herman. I think that the Herman loss was directly in line to why that team underachieved in 15, Mark. I know we talked about that before, was, that Urban didn't properly replace Tom Herman. Ed Warner and Tim Beck running that offense the next year was just a circus. And it cost a team with one of the most talented rosters I've ever seen a chance to repeat. So, but I just think that, and Saban's gone through this a lot over the years too. Remember, he's lost a lot of staff after national championship years too. But the key with Saban is he was always able to replenish his staff. And I think that's his argument for, another one of his arguments for the greatest coach of all time, was always his ability. And he had misses on staff hires too. I remember there were some Alabama fans that complained about Bill O'Brien as his offensive coordinator there for the couple years that he was in Alabama. I think you probably remember that, taking some calls in that time frame from Bama fans, Mark.
Yeah.
I just think overall, when you look at this thing, I mean, to me, the bottom line is this. I think Day, when it comes to defensive coordinator, he's had 3 hires. 2 of them he did really well with. Hafley was really good in 2019, but then he missed big time on Kerry Combs. And, when you look at it, I do think that that's what held back the 20 team, definitely held back the 21 team. And it's a shame because they had just a great offense in 21. But that defense was just bad. And it totally got exposed against Oregon, obviously got exposed in the most important game. And, I just, now he obviously more than made up with it with Knowles. It took Knowles till his second year to really get the defense, to a top flight level. I thought that they had some misses in recruiting that hurt their secondary in 22, which was a big reason they gave up a lot of chunk pass plays, which was the ultimate downfall to their defense in 22. But he made some adjustments. They had better secondary play in 23. Didn't quite have the dominant pass rush, but played really good run defense and didn't give up the same chunk plays they gave up in 22. And then last year, I'd have to say that's still going to go down as probably one of the 3 or 4 best Ohio State defenses, I think, ever. I don't know what you think, Mark, but, I mean, bottom line, if he's going to leave on that note, that's pretty impressive.
In this day and age, yes. With a sliding scale of metrics and statistics, yes, I would agree with you.
I mean, I will say too, just as far as candidates goes, there's a couple of names that most Buckeye fans, I know the one name that's thrown out that a lot of people like is Jim Leonhard. Mark, I know you remember that name. He's in the NFL right now, coaching secondary. I believe he was running Wisconsin's defense there for a few years, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, did it rather well. Yes.
Yeah.
Matt and I had a number of conversations about Jim Leonhard when USC was needing to move up move on from Alex Grinch and failed to do so in the offseason that they should have, and of course waited a year too late. Yeah, he's running the secondary at, I just saw this. I was just looking at something on Jim Leonard.
Yeah, I forgot too. Was it Denver, Mark?
Yeah, the Broncos.
Denver. Yes.
Was it Denver? Okay.
Both of you. Yeah.
By the way, Ohio State fans, Matt, would have told your USC people to not put your hands on the Alex Grinch stove, by the way. They would have cautioned you with we went down that road in 2018, and now a lot of fans blame Grinch, and a lot of fans also blame Schiano for, the defensive debacle of 2018 that we had too. But
we've got a couple folks in the chat that must have inside intel that are letting us know that Jim Leonard will not leave the Denver Broncos.
Okay. Well, I was saying that also as a preference on my part too, Mark. I was not saying that it would happen.
Yeah, but I've not seen him linked to the job. But how many times does this happen? And Matt would be able to speak to this much better than I. We see it over and over and over. Head coaching and coordinator changes and speculation that ensues, of course, as soon as there's a change about who the next guy is going to be. It seems as though a large portion of the time, somebody who's not even on the list that we see all over the place, their top 5, their top 7, their top 9, and then all of a sudden we get some guy that nobody's considering. I see that frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Mark, I got to run.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Good to see you, Matt.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep.
Matt is off to cover the USC-UCLA game. Got to check in on that one.
Got some basketball action.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll throw out one other name too, Mark. I would also say that Jeff Hafley, speaking of the four, is another name that's been mentioned.
I brought him up. Yep.
If they could poach him, I think that would be the other major name here. But you know what, though? To be fair, a lot of this, what do they say? It's X's and O's, or is it Jimmy's and Joe's? But the talent that's heading out the door is going to be significant. And to be fair to Kerry Combs, and I don't think Combs was the right guy for the job. And obviously he had 2 seasons to work with it. Now the 20 season was disjointed because of COVID. But to be fair to him, he did not inherit as talented a defense as Jeff Hafley inherited. So, and that's the other thing too, is now I know with the way Ohio State recruits, with the way they can work the portal, but the losses on defense are going to be fairly significant off of this defense with the amount of talent that's going to the NFL. Now they still have some key players back, but I mean, especially on the D line, they're losing a lot of key personnel there.
Well, sure. It's going to be almost impossible to replicate this performance, but going back to the previous point that you made, and it's something that I asked Marty Lee from Penn State Rivals, they went from Brent Pry to Manny Diaz to Tom Allen and now Jim Knowles. And the point being that if you are recruiting top level talent, not making a mistake at that defensive coordinator role, like Kerry Combs and like we could go back a few years before, more so than Knowles being an upgrade on Allen, or Allen being an upgrade on Diaz, and Diaz to Pry, that they all did really good jobs there because they know what they're doing. And even though they have slightly different philosophies, the track record has shown that they are highly capable and they did the job. I'm just making the point that I would be ecstatic with Hafley or Leonard because I know that they can do the job. There's a possibility Matt Guerrero gets promoted.
See, that's the one issue that I
don't want to see that. That doesn't mean he won't do a great job. There has to be less confidence, not because he's not an up and comer who may one day, and that day may be week 1, 2025, but there's just less certainty about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing is you want a guy that's run a defense before. Yeah. And this was what he did after the Combs mistake is he had a guy. Now, I was a little bit leery about going to get a Big 12 guy, after Combs. But, to be fair, he did a good job of defending Big 12 offenses and had a fairly highly rated defense at Oklahoma State his last year. But would that scheme work against Big Ten teams who are more built around the power run game than are built around a little bit more air raid oriented offenses in the Big 12. So that was always the thing that I was a little bit leery about with Knowles coming over. He was going to come in. He had the 3 safety look. Now, obviously that worked this year because they had, safety, 3 really good guys they could play at those positions. It's like when you back to the Jimmies and Joes, when they hired Jeff Hafley, they wanted to run single high. Well, what makes it ideal? Well, they had 2 first-round corners and another corner that went like in the 3rd or 4th round of the draft, and Wade, Arnett, and Okuda in 19, who you could run that scheme with.
And even though it's a different position, what you're getting at is are you saying that maybe a Bryson Shaw heading up the safety position in 2021 isn't ideal?
Bit of a drop off from Jordan Fuller, who was a very underrated player on the 2019 defense. You think about some of the star power on that. He was one of the more underrated guys. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting for me. I would like a proven guy. I understand why they would want to promote maybe somebody from within. Day was giving kudos to him yesterday at the not to Jim Knowles, but to Gutierrez at the celebration yesterday. But I just would be more sold if they had somebody, if they can go out and find somebody that's had a track record, of at least putting together top 5, top 10 defenses. It has at least done it for maybe at least a couple years.
Yeah. Well, Ryan Day's there, and he's working with the defense, and he sees what Matt Guerrero and Tim Walton brought to the table and how involved they were in game planning and scheming. So there is something we don't know.
Yeah. One other thing, and this is Zach Smith was making this point today on his show, and I totally agree. Don't do the co-defensive coordinator thing, which I think Notre Dame might be about ready to do with their particular situation. Just have one voice running your defense. And
yes.
I think that's the better route to clearly go.
Somebody should run some lists on that. I would like to know when that has worked.
Right. By the way, I'm hearing the rumblings, and you guys might get into this also on Buckeye Talk, that Kelly, that's serious about him, taking the Houston offensive coordinator job, which, does that take us back down the road of Ryan Day calling the plays again, which, I mean, I think in some instances he, is a good game planner, but what was always the thought process? That he could move more into the CEO role, and that, he could have that taken off of his plate.
So they won a national championship with Ryan Day being the head coach and the CEO and having an offensive coordinator. Why would they want to break that format? Number one. Number two, after they had already decided that was the route to go with the complexity of the sport and the roster computation and everything that goes into it now. And on top of that, Chip Kelly and his relationship with Ryan Day may have been a good transitional phase for him to work with somebody where it was maybe easier for him to pull off the reins, to hand them over to that's a good transition for him to now move into another guy that he's less familiar with, but has proven himself to be a great offensive coordinator. And then he can continue this path. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah. I mean, well, he got the one guy that he had the utmost trust in, which is, I mean, it couldn't be more ideal, because remember, that was initially supposed to be Bill O'Brien.
I was just going to say, if we could only run parallel universes, it would be interesting to know how that season would have ended with Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. Maybe it's a national championship.
See, that's the one thing, because they thought with bringing Kelly in, they would be more of that run-focused offense, as opposed to, being more dependent on the pass.
And you noted the other night how few of passes they did throw in the national championship game. It was only 21. It was in the mid-20s in all these playoff games. and in most of the games the entire season.
No, they maintain good balance, and if you go back and look at it, Howard did not throw for a ton of yards in the championship game, but because a lot of it early on until the bomb to Jeremiah Smith to put the game away, a lot of it was more shorter to intermediate stuff. The slants, the crossers, the out routes that he throws very accurately. But against Oregon, they were able to hit the chunk plays, so that made the numbers look a little bit better. But yeah, I thought. And by the way, as much as people were down on Ryan Day after that last game of the season, a lot of people were really down on Chip Kelly. I was one of them. I wanted to hear from him after that game, especially after that game plan. And then,
For as much as we weren't completely eye to eye after that game, I was right there with you on the game plan and the approach on offense. I just thought it was deplorable, but also Ryan Day had a hand in that. Certainly, he's the head coach. He's ultimately responsible when he sees something heading in a certain direction and it's mid to late third quarter. Well, let's start doing what we do best, regardless of what Chip Kelly's calling. Take it over. You're the head coach, not take over the play calling, but say, hey, let's step it up and get the ball to our best playmakers. And also that third down play drove me up the wall when there might have been 8 minutes left in the game and they're at their own 15-yard line and calling a draw play on 3rd and 9. That's a give ups. You do that. What was it? 10-10? Must have been still 10-10 at that point.
No, it was still 10-10 because I think that was after the Sawyer interception.
Yeah, like if you're not feeling good about your offense, your quarterback had his bell rung or whatever issue you determined through what was inevitably a pick six, basically, but it's mid-second quarter, then you say, hey, we've got a great defense. Just punt the ball. Let's try to get our footing, get better field position for the next time. But at 8 minutes left, you don't have time for that. You can't give up a possession, especially when your punt game was so marginal to be kind in that game. They gave up so much yardage on the punt exchange in that game that I don't know that a lot of people kept track of that. But in the fourth quarter, they basically played a 1975 style Ohio State Michigan game, and they played on the wrong end of the field for that.
Well, yeah, I don't want to delve too much into this, but as bad as that play calling was, you outlined, Mark, the play calling after the Caleb Downs interception was even worse than that. They ran 2 draws and some throwback screen that was absolutely awful.
Oh, Trevion Henderson caught like 6-7 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Right.
He was supposed to be able to run 17 yards. Yeah, that was awful. Yeah.
I mean, I think Chip, though, the team woke up, and they found out, hey, we got this Jeremiah Smith guy on the outside. We need to find ways to get him the football. We have this Emeka Egbuka guy. We need to, get him the football. And, listen, I listened to your One Team Up North caller talk about the scheme. I think that, and I get what he's saying about the fact that teams that run man against Ohio State are flirting with disaster because no teams have the corners to stay with Ohio State's receivers. But listen, I understand when teams play more zone, keep their safeties deep and force Ohio State to go 20-20 and then get stops inside the red zone, which is really what the Team Up North's defense is designed to do. It's basically play 20-20 kind of defense. And if you look at it, they moved the ball fairly well in the game 20-20. It was just, the breakdowns inside the red area that cost them. But it's not that you can't throw the ball against that defense. You might not be able to throw deeper throws, but you can still work intermediate stuff against a defense that's set up that way. So to say that that's just like a complete way to shut down a passing game, I think is a misnomer. I think you just have to work different passing concepts and different route concepts against that style of defense.
Our buddy Kyle McCord threw for about 275 the year before.
Right. So it's not like you can't throw the ball. It's just that once you get into the red zone, you need to score touchdowns and not miss field goals as well and not throw interceptions.
Well, David, despite the meandering path and a few off-road incidents, the final destination is national championship.
Well, and I'm going to be back 6 p.m. Monday, right, Mark?
This is 3 weeks from now. We're
Oh,
going to
3
build
weeks.
this up.
Well,
We're going to raise the hype
okay. Well,
through the roof. Like, I want every channel. I'm going to be getting on every host on every team channel that we have, especially our friends at the Michigan channel.
There we go. Bring them on.
Hype, hype, hype. I've already told them. Hype, hype, hype this up because I'm going to take on all comers.
Well, I'll have my national championship shirt by that time frame.
Nice.
So I'll be able to show them what a true champion is. And, obviously we didn't have to hire a Connor Stallions to achieve this. So we know that. And on top of that, I don't think that there is any case that needs to be made for a program that's been the most consistent in college football for over 30 years, Mark. I don't think we need to make a case considering they've been, I believe, if not the best, one of the 2 best programs in college football for a fairly long period of time.
This will be part of my opening statement. Basically, Michigan started playing football and successfully way ahead of Ohio State. And basically, if I'm a Michigan fan, I am leaning on 62-52. I'm leaning on the all-time series record. That's what I'm going to go with constantly, over and over and over. I'm going to beat Ohio State fans over the head with 62-52. And I'm also going to remind them, and this is going to be a little bit, I'm going to state it correctly. I keep saying 4-0 or 0-4. Well, I don't know what that pertains to. If you want to say 4 consecutive wins, but who's 0-4? Ryan Day's not 0-4. He's 1-4. Sharon Moore's not 4-0. No, he's 2-0. Another thing that drives me crazy is I see Michigan fans who double dip. They double up the win in 2023 because Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. And then Sharon Moore. Is Sharon Moore 2-0? Well, if Sharon Moore's 2-0, then Harbaugh only won the other 2 games. And the legend that is Jim Harbaugh is 2-5 in this rivalry. Are you going to build a statue to this guy? He's 2-5.
Right.
That sucks.
One of your fans tried to come in. Didn't somebody call you after they won last year and say that they were making the case that he is one of the 2 greatest Big Ten coaches of all time?
Yeah, that's insane.
That's ridiculous. I mean, then what is Urban Meyer? Who never lost to Harbaugh and lost only 9 games while he was at Ohio State as a coach?
Yes. Jim Harbaugh had 5 lost seasons. Urban Meyer lost 9 games in 7 years. Yeah, there's no comparison. So basically, I'm going to say 4 straight, and I get it. In the moment, if all we're talking about is the series record and nothing else, hey, I would, if I was a Michigan fan, I would talk that up over and over and over. I just don't want to hear 0-4, 0-4, because that's a meaningless. That's like my retort to that is 8-4.
Right.
Because Ohio State won the previous 8. So you're just picking an arbitrary number of years. And so 0-4, okay, 8-4. There you go. There's my response.
Well, I'll say this, Mark. I've heard some people say that use the pro analogy, and we've talked about the proization of college football, maybe NFL junior, NFL light, whatever term you want to use. And I've heard some people say, well, like if the Steelers lost to the Browns but went on to win the Super Bowl or something, or which is a great rivalry, or was once a great rivalry, or but it's not the same thing. To me, it's still not the same thing. And I will say, and I've said this to you, remember the first question I asked you after the national title game about the game losing? To me, it still is very meaningful. And now,
absolutely.
Here's the thing, though: 12-team playoff. We're going to see within the next 3 or 4 years some rematches. Mark my words, we will see rematches in the playoff games, and then that's when we see really meaningful.
Which brings us to an interesting trivia question. That Ohio State-Oregon game, unless I'm missing something, was the first rematch in the history of the 12-team playoff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so basically my culmination of that is that I think that is the Michigan fans' best 2 arguments. And then after that, there's really nothing. It's really not, and I hate to phrase it like this, I truly do. but it's not that close.
No,
It's
no.
it's it's not that close.
Yeah, in the modern era of college football, and somebody has to define the modern era, the poll era, which is, by the way, poll. If you ever notice, by the way, a lot of teams only look at the poll era national titles to begin with, Mark,
Yeah.
since the poll era started. If you ever notice that, that's also on a
Yeah.
lot of disclaimers when they talk about even national championships. I believe that was what, 36 or 39, if I'm not mistaken.
36.
36.
You're throwing in 39 because that, of course, was the first men's basketball championship year that Ohio State played Oregon.
That's right. That might have been my confusion there, but
But,
yeah,
in 1936.
right. Yeah, and to have played for 6 national championships over the course of a 23, 24 year period or whatever it has been here is unprecedented for any program outside of Alabama.
Yeah, and the typical Michigan fan, not all Michigan fans, but the typical Michigan fan just thinks Ohio State fans go to 2000. No. You can go to 1970. You can go to 1950. We can talk post World War II. That was
Right.
a long time ago, folks. I don't think any of us here talking remember World War II.
We
Like,
could even include the Cooper years, Mark. I mean, even
Yes.
putting in the lousy Cooper years.
And I hear people that say, "Oh, you're just cherry picking." Do you understand the term cherry picking? That would be like saying, "Oh, well, let's take these 3 years here and then these 7 over here." No, we're going back 80 years. That's not cherry picking.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You'd have to go before indoor plumbing and running water, and horse and buggy time is how they make their case.
It's
Mark, let's just be
not
fair.
close. And
It
I
is.
love our Michigan fans. And I would be, if we jettisoned us to some other rivalry that had the same pulse here on our channel, I would be arguing, I'd size it all up and I'd make my determination and I'd be arguing whatever I'd be arguing for a particular side. So it really has little to do with me being an Ohio State fan and me simply, I'm going to be doing nothing but rolling out numbers saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, counter that.
When you did program rankings, did you have Ohio State third on your all-time program rankings, or did you have them? Because I think right now they are no worse. I think this helps them to at least maybe vault into no worse than the number 2 spot in all-time program rankings.
Okay, you just answered my question. I didn't know if you were talking about current, because I will roll out a list of 2025 current program rankings, but then, we will do the all-time rankings as well. I don't know where I had Ohio State ranked. It was based on just a number system. I didn't just throw teams up there. I came up with the whole system, and whatever the numbers spit out, that's what it was.
Right there, because for a while I could see a person maybe making a case for a USC or a Notre Dame,
Sure.
maybe making a case for a USC Notre Dame. But I think this one this year can put us at least in the number 2 spot, I believe, all time on program rankings. So, well, I'm going to do research. I'm going to be ready for it. I'm looking forward to it in a few weeks. I know your largest fan base is probably going to be amped up for it, right, Mark?
Well, Dave, you may not like this, but you don't need to do any research or anything. I'm not taking any Ohio State calls.
Oh, really?
0.
Okay.
No, it's me against the world.
Okay. Well, you're going to take on the delusional and the deniers, Mark. So
I just
have at it.
Clear the deck, and I just want me against everyone.
You invite your buddy on that night?
Well, see, the last time, it's funny. All Michigan fans should listen up on this. This was probably last off season, prior to 2024. I had Steve Dace on, and I flat out asked him, which is the better program all time? And you know what his answer was? I don't know. It's too close to call.
Really?
So he does not have a definitive, this is after Michigan won the national championship.
Well, I have heard, to be fair to him, give Ohio State his flowers. In fact, I've heard him say that I thought he had said in the modern era no program has been more consistently good than Ohio State, which I think is
Yeah,
an
I can
obvious
recall
statement.
our conversation. He basically said Michigan was decidedly better for the first roughly half of the history of college football, and Ohio State has been decidedly better the second half.
Yeah.
I just think that the second half, and I would argue it's more than the second half. It's more like about 80 years versus whatever the rest of that would be from the 1890s to the 1940s, 50 years,
Right.
that they're just more important.
Right.
I'm not going to skew records or say weight records or anything, but let's be honest. What is happening right now, or what happened in 1990 or 1980, is just more realistic. It's more real football. It's more legitimate than guys that were playing. With all due respect, they were tremendous athletes for their era, but they were playing club teams in 1900.
Right.
Like, what are we doing here? These are not comparable.
Yeah. Well, what did they say? Where would Yale? Where would Harvard? Where would these programs be if you're including all those national titles into the equation, Mark? Right?
Yeah, and that's what's difficult about it. And this will probably be part of the conversation. And trying to pull back the Ohio State fandom and just be very reasonable about this, is that I went all the way back to 1869. And I tried to determine, can I find a year where I could say, okay, that's the year that, based on the number of teams playing and based on their schedules being legitimate against each other and all of that, where, okay, this marks a legitimacy.
Mm.
Because for anyone, whether you're Ohio State fan, Notre Dame fan, Michigan fan, whatever, let's be honest. We started tracking college football in 1869. That's when the first game was played. And Rutgers claims a national championship. They played 2 games. And you know what, David? You would think that they won both of those games. They didn't even win both of those games. They split the games.
Right. Right.
And so it's such a gradual legitimacy and such a gradual upgrade in scheduling and all of that, that it's difficult to, I did it again. I went and there was no big leap. It just kind of gradually, more teams joined and started to play. And so it's impossible to say, okay, this is the year that it should start to truly count. You can't do that.
Yeah, some people want to compare college football to like the 80s and 90s and say you can't compare eras. Go and try and compare it to the 1880s or 1890s.
I have had people just, I think, arbitrarily say, let's start modern college football is in 1980. And my argument, my counterpoint is, of course, very obvious. That's just an arbitrary year that you chose because it's the beginning of a decade. There was nothing going on in 1979 versus 1980 that made any difference in the way college football was played. So it's just an arbitrary selection.
Well, good show tonight, my friend. I will get back to you 3 weeks.
Yes.
We will get back together on this.
Build this up.
Yes. 6 o'clock. So that should be fun.
And I might be here all night. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. So you're just taking Team Up North calls that night, though, by the way, right?
I am.
Okay.
So
all right,
I might
Mark.
be here for 20 minutes. Well, I'm definitely going to talk for more than 20 minutes, but I may not get any calls and I might shut it down, or I may be here all night. But as long as I'm getting calls and it makes business sense in other ways, then I will be here.
Get the double stuffed Oreos ready, Mark. There you go.
We could do that. That might be the tonic that I need to either
deal with
that
them.
or the Advil. I don't know what I'm going to need.
Yes, that's right. Plenty of aspirin. All right. Take care, my friend. Have a good night.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. All right, folks. We do appreciate everyone. And you Michigan fans, you guys are great sports. So I appreciate it. So thank you for being here. We do appreciate everyone. And I know that you guys are going after each other in the chat. I hope that you're doing that somewhat respectfully. So the terms trash talk and respectfully don't coincide, but in some way that they have to coincide here at the Voice of College Football. So we do hope that you trash talk respectfully and don't make it personal. And when I made a comment earlier about somebody, when somebody had mentioned that Jim Leonard was staying with the Broncos, and that's confirmed, I was not making fun of any particular person in the chat that put that. Just understand that when I see that in the chat, there's a large portion of the time that people are just making that up or just saying that just to be, just to try to prove that they're knowledgeable, or just trying to push back on the discussion. So that particular person, I forget who it was, actually cited a respected college football writer, NFL writer, who made that statement or reported that Jim Leonard's staying with the Broncos. So I am in no way contradicting that. That wasn't my point. My point was, when people just throw stuff in the chat, I don't know until I look it up whether it's legit or not. But Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, Notre Dame fans, whoever you root for, yeah, that was Bootzilla, I believe, who made that statement. So again, Bootzilla, I was not picking on you. Just again, I think you understand the nature of what we do here and the conversations. And so some people just throw out things like that just to basically say, stop talking about Jim Leonard. He's not coming to Ohio State. Forget it. And they don't know what they're talking about. Thank you so much for backing that up with the actual statement from, it was a well-known and respected NFL writer, I believe. I forget who it was, but I instantly recognized their name. But, we've got Moose here, and Moose has been phenomenal in support of the Voice of College Football and all sorts of great people here. Nick was here earlier. And of course, on the Ohio State side, we've got Victor's here, and we appreciate Ralph and Lisa. Thank you so much for being here on the Buckeye side. And again, Moose is phenomenal. Bilal, I hope you guys are just behaving yourselves to a certain degree. Moose says, guess what, Mark? So was every other team. They were all playing bad teams. Do you want me to show you Ohio State's schedule when they first started? Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. Nobody was playing completely good teams. They were looking for teams to play. There weren't enough teams playing legitimate college football that they were playing. I was going to use a derogatory term. They were playing lesser club teams. And again, believe me, I've put enough thought and research into this. And I would love to be declarative and say, you know what? College football became legitimate in 1920. You just can't do it. You start in 1869, and I've done it. I've pulled up the standings in 1969 between Rutgers and I believe Princeton. 1869. Two teams. They played twice. That's a college football season. It's not legitimate, but the sport had to start somewhere. And so those games count on the record. That Rutgers win counts in the win-loss column as being one next digit, just like Ohio State's win against Notre Dame last Monday. Okay. We understand that those are two entirely different levels of play and different weight values of play on the field. So we understand that. But I'm not looking to make some kind of metric and weight each season and give more recency bias. No, but it's worth the discussion. And yes, do I believe that games played in the year 2000 or 1968 or 1982 are more relevant and more valid than seasons played in 1898? Absolutely, I do. That's not an easy or a difficult argument to make. It's pretty obvious. I'm not saying get rid of 19 or 1898. Yeah, even national championships. I'm not going to go in all these different directions because I am just giving away free commentary at this point. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. The next time you will see me will be the Iowa show at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central on the Iowa channel with Corey Bratta. And then, of course, I've got a date with Steve Dace tomorrow on Michigan Podcast. How about that? So Michigan Podcast, be looking out for me and Steve Dace. And otherwise, it's Corey Bratta and myself for the Iowa show, 5:30 Eastern on Tuesday. Adam, thank you so much for showing up. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for the contribution, Adam. Hi, Mark. I just heard about Jim Knowles. What motivated Knowles to go to inferior Penn State? Well, we're only conjecturing, but some of these things are quite obvious. More money, making roughly $2.75 million per season at Ohio State, and with bonuses that approached $3 million based on reports. Penn State contract, Adam, 3 years, $9.3 million. That's point number one, more money. There was something made in an article, and I brought this up about Jim Knowles being from Philadelphia, but as a number of people in the chat, I think, pointed out, and I knew this as soon as I stated it, the distance between Happy Valley and Philadelphia and Happy Valley and Columbus is inconsequential. It's roughly the same. So I don't think that matters. I don't think, maybe it does, because he does have family, as talked about with our Penn State Rivals guy, Marty Leap. He does have family and friends in Pennsylvania, but I doubt if that had much to do with it, if anything. Also, just tension between he and Ryan Day, reportedly of him having a certain persuasion, influence pushed on him by Ryan Day that probably stems from his first year in Columbus in 2022. Very good defense that collapsed in the fourth quarter against the run, against Michigan. And I don't know that Ryan Day trusted him as much past that game. And also they had fourth quarter issues that season against Georgia in the college football playoff. And I don't know that, again, Ryan Day is pretty tight to the vest, but you can read between the lines of his news conferences. And once Chip Kelly was hired, and the decision was made before the Chip Kelly hire, which obviously was the Bill O'Brien hire, but he only worked at Ohio State for about 3 weeks. But Ohio State had made a commitment to go with an offensive coordinator and take those duties away from Ryan Day, calling the plays, scheming the offense. And that was, I applauded that at the time. I was pushing for that 2 or 3 years prior to say Ryan Day needs to be a CEO. And so, hey, you can look up the live streams, you can look up the videos that I posted that said this is a smart move. Not that Ryan Day can't run an offense. Obviously he can. That's his calling card. That's what made him one of the best coaches in college football and what got him this job and has helped him to succeed in this job. But you just can't handle it all. And I thought Ryan Day made a few questionable coaching decisions as game manager, pull him out of the offensive play calling and get his mind focused on game and clock management and situational management, and hire him a really good offensive coordinator. And they fell into the best possible situation with a guy that was his mentor, Chip Kelly. So once Ryan Day removed himself, and I believe he was pushed in that direction, away from the offensive play calling, he stated a number of times, I'm going to be more involved in the defense and the special teams. I'm going to be wandering over there in practice. I'm going to give my input now, as opposed to 2021, 2022, where it was simply, and 2023, because Chip Kelly was just the new hire for this year, where Ryan Day had to be just boom, head coach of the offense, and Jim Knowles, take it away, We trust you. This is why we're paying you all this money. But Ryan Day flat out said, not because they're not doing a good job, but I need to be more involved. I need to be more of a head coach of the entire team. So possibly, this is a bit of speculation, Jim Knowles did not take to that. And then we've got our buddy Bilal. We appreciate you. Mark, you're never going to worry about me not being respectful. I just don't condone cheating. Yeah, well, I'm not worrying about anyone not being respectful. I'm not a big worry type individual. I'm just confirming that that's what we want to have happen here at the Voice of College Football. And I'm not going to take the bait on the cheating comment. We've talked so much Michigan cheating here. We don't want to do that until the NCAA makes its ruling. When is that coming, by the way? And I've stated this, and shoot, we have logged probably at this point hundreds of hours on the topic. And I will stand by us doing a excellent job at being fair, presenting all sides, not jumping to conclusions, presenting reasonable speculation, but not calling it fact. Just what if this, or what if this means that this happened, in all those scenarios. And we really took everyone through it for a few months. And then at a certain point, enough's enough. We're done. We don't have any other information. Certainly it was asked about. We addressed it a few times here and there after those initial 3 or 4 months. But after that, dropped it. I continue to drop it. I'm waiting for the final decision. And I could talk about this all night, because I think that there are valid claims on the Michigan side as to it not mattering in terms of the competition on the field. And there are certainly claims that are valid on the other side. What I want to know is who that information went to, that Connor Stalions and his legion of minions gathered up. Where did that intel go? And there's strong indication that it went to the defensive coordinator. And that was, of course, not Wink Martindale, Mike McDonald. And now I'm drawing a blank. Rick Minter. Okay, Mike Minter, Rick Minter. There's two that have been involved in football. Mike Minter and Mike McDonald. Those would have been the two DCs during that time. Based on video evidence and pictures and so forth, it seems pretty obvious that they knew they had this information given to them that Connor Stalions brought. And, answer me this, because I brought this up many times in the past as well. College football coaches are paranoid. They want to account for every second. They don't want to lose any time to any frivolous or anything that is not part of the mission. I'm talking about the very elite college football coaches and programs. They're paranoid about, we cannot waste time. Every second counts. So if this Connor Stalions guy is bringing this intel to your defensive staff and the defensive coordinator for 2.5 seasons, and it's not reaping benefits, then that would have been shut down a long time ago. That would have been shut down after 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, you brought us this intel. It's not doing us any good. Stop. We don't want to see any more of it. Somebody explain that to me. Give me a counterpoint to that. It doesn't make any sense. If I ran a company and I had a particular person on the low end of the chain do some kind of task, or they they brought the intel to me. They brought whatever that project was to me, and it proved to be inefficient, ineffective, worthless. Well, I wouldn't continue to have them do that and bring me that intel, obviously. So it must have been valuable. I don't know how you get around that point. All right, folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We got our buddy Tukey G stopping by too. We're going to have, man, we got so much to get to. So if you haven't watched, I delivered power rankings for all the conferences. So check those out. That was last week. And then this week we're doing conference rankings. But before we get to the final conference rankings, we got to break down all the results in all the conferences. So we released the Big 12 on Monday or on Sunday. Monday, we released the ACC. I'd like to do 2 videos tomorrow if I've got time and knock out the SEC and the Big 10, then do the final synopsis of all the conference rankings and break it all down. So folks, these are unlike any other conference rankings that you've seen. We don't just say, the Big 10 was 13-8, the SEC was 15-9, and they were 8-12, and there you go. Boom, 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 boom. No. We were breaking down the records, the results. We're breaking down the seedings. It matters who you play. We're breaking down point differentials. We're breaking down, again, seeding differences. We're breaking down the winning percentages of the teams playing each other, meaning all the ACC wins. They won 12 against the rest of the conferences. How good were those teams? Those 12 teams that won those 12 games for the ACC against the other conferences. And how good were the teams that they beat? What was their winning percentage? Break it all down. And we're going to do coaches' hot seats. I'm going to knock down my coaches' hiring rankings. So all the coaches got hired for 2025, rank all of them. We're going to do our program rankings, both for 2025 and all time. And I got to separate those by a few months because people get confused. We'll do our coaches' rankings like we do every year. And we're going to do the state of the Voice of College Football. We do that every year during the off season, the state of the Voice of College Football. And then we also, there was something else on my mind. Oh, for anyone who is either a member on Patreon or on YouTube or is not going to do a live stream, we're just going to talk about what do you want to see? What do you want to be involved in to be a member here at the Voice of College Football? And we'll talk about that as well. So much to get to, so much to do, way beyond even what I just talked about. I'm very transparent about a lot of things, and this would be one. I'm not going to tell you how much I spent to write this book. I will tell you that I got to sell about 5,000 copies to break even. That's not why you should buy the book. The links in the description section of this video and all the videos. If you love college football and you're here, there's 132 on the line between Twitter and our YouTube channel. So if you watch us on Twitter, please jump over to the YouTube channel. That way you can comment in the chat. But the links down in the description section, if you love college football, I'm telling you, for $9.99, you will love this book. I'm going to start to post some of the testimonials on this book. Somebody reminded me of that today. They're like, Mark, people love this book. They're buying this book. They leave great comments. You need to post those comments because you telling people it's a great book, that doesn't mean anything. The people that have read the book let me know, hey, we love your book. It's a great book. So, take a shot on this one. If you want a signed copy, hit me up at MarkRogersTV@gmail.com and let me know. MarkRogersTV@gmail.com for a signed copy. Disputed National Champions. I will not explain what it's about right this second. But again, historical reset of the 1990s, but it's not a history book. It's about the future as well. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos as well. When you shop on Amazon, please use our link. And we will see you Tuesday with the Iowa show at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. Thank you, everyone. You guys are amazing. Brandon, anybody I did not acknowledge, I apologize, but Bootzilla and everyone else, thanks for being here at the Voice of College Football. We'll see you next time.